lady was going through something. It seemed like it was grief, maybe, and she was having some issues with mental health. And she said that she experienced it on, let's say, for example, the Monday. She immediately went online with her issues. Someone wrote in the comments, they asked her the question. I was like, hey, it seems like you're having a hard time. Instead of maybe using an online tool to soothe you, she's like, why don't you sit down and speak to someone? And this person got like negative feedback and all this other stuff. And then one person wrote back in support of the person. They said, sometimes when you go straight to online and not to a real person, is because you want that instant gratification, that instant attention, and that instant likes and those instant views.
Yeah.
And because no one, especially strangers online, they're not going to hold you accountable. Whereas if you were to go to someone, they would probably ask you a question along the lines is, what are you doing to better yourself? And what have you done to contribute to the situation? And sometimes we don't want to hear that. So when we go to strangers or randoms online, it's like, you go, boy, you go, girl. But after the engagement starts to die down, you're still left with whatever it is you're going through. How addictive is the online feedback to the clients that you help with versus the more somber, the most sober, hey, we need to get you through this, but there's going to be some work you have to do as well?
No, that's a phenomenal question. I mean, when you put things online, you're kind of playing Russian roulette because you will get people who are supportive and then you'll get people who are not. And, I think that boils down to validation. We as humans, we love validation and we thrive off of that and sometimes also negative validation. But, when it comes to going online, I understand it from a human perspective. But from a therapist perspective, again, it's very much Russian roulette. The last thing somebody who is bawling their eyes out, being very vulnerable online is to hear, I see it all the time, comments like, go unalive yourself or things like that. And I mean, if somebody's in that broken of a spot, that is the worst thing you could ever say to somebody, even regardless being in a bad spot. But it's a tight rope you walk if you also put yourself out there like that. And people just aren't very nice and aren't very sensitive to mental health, especially if you don't know how it feels. But I think it's great for education and for normalizing therapy, but I don't think it's great for personal validation and support.
I agree. I agree. The validation is it's so dangerous. And then when you tie in the attention, you can become drunk with it. What I found interesting, and I share this in an interview that I was a part of, was I was surprised how many people offer sex as a way to soothe the person going through it. And then I was surprised how many people accept that. Have you come across that as well?
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, let's again just going back to validating behaviors. Sex is incredibly validating. You get that touch, you get that emotional piece of it, but then it's over, and then you're left with everything that you were trying to fill.
And now you're in a situation where you not only have the initial issue, you have this issue because there's a sense of being used. Now you could have used that person for a temporary high, right? But after you've given yourself to someone, because it's never someone that they're in a relationship with, right? And that's I think the dangerous parts. Like there's one person, she shared a story with me where she was going through it and it was literally any and everyone,
Yeah.
right? Like after her session, she'd be meeting people in the parking lot, should meet be people everywhere. And I asked her the question. I was like, I asked her to describe the feeling before and after. And she said the build up to it was very comforting. And then afterwards, it was like, oh my God. So then she had to do it more because she didn't want that feeling to ever end. Right.
No, and I mean, I can greatly relate to that, kind of again going back to why we got here, in my teens. And sex can also be a self-harming behavior. I see it all the time, and it's never ever ever anybody's fault for things that happen to that, but you tend to put yourself in riskier positions as well, but it all comes down to needing connection. When I was in my teens, I had mommy and daddy issues, and I was searching for connection in anybody who threw out their hand. And as an adult, that has created a lot of shame and a lot of work that I have to undo because I was so desperate for connection. And I think that's a lot what it comes down to is we're connection beings. And when that's not getting met, we act out, or we're these little children who are screaming for help.
So is that so what would be like the cause of that seeking out and then maybe because I'm guessing when you're helping your clients, the it's more of let's say an emotional and a mental fix. But if someone's using the physical, how do you take them off of that and then get them back onto, and I know I'm describing like a baby like breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and I do
You're
apologize
fine.
everyone, right? But how do you take them off of the bottle which is the physical and back onto maybe the connection that is more important and more sustaining, whereas okay, let's fix you emotionally, let's fix you mentally.
So I have a very annoying answer, and I think it comes down to self love. It's working on that. But that stupid quote, you can't love anybody until you love yourself? That's not true. What is true is you will never be able to accept love and connection until you love yourself, because you will always push it away out of fear because you want this thing so much, but it's a push and pull because when it's healthy, if you've never experienced that, that's scary as hell. But I think it starts with trying to love yourself. And it's impossible to go from I hate myself to I love myself. No. I talk a lot with my clients about finding neutrality. Instead of saying I'm such a stupid idiot, say, that wasn't my smartest moment, but we're gonna work toward it. What we feed our brains is so important.